We call our meeting to order. This is the Planning Commission on Tuesday, May 9th, 2023. And Dave, would you please start with the roll call?
Ayers.
Here.
Brisbane. Tice.
Here.
Zierden.
Here.
And Weaver.
Here. All right, all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is the approval, to make a motion to approve or amend the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve or amend the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed. All right, and the next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from February 14th, 2023. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I will make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed for approval of the minutes. And then we're moving on to the council liaison report. Steve, if you do us the honors.
Yes, the meeting was Monday, May 1st. Wasn't a very long meeting. As far as what we accomplished, the council approved an agreement with Baker Tilly for municipal advisor services. What they will do with the Bushman Road project is to provide financing options and kind of present that to the council. The Bushman Road design contract and amendment, there was a project update. Ideal Township will be joining us with a portion of the road. What that means is construction will be pushed out to 2025. The city acquired the old Charter Communications building, which is right behind the Public Works building. It was a small area where they had their electronic gear, had a backup generator, and they no longer need it. So it made sense for the city to acquire it, basically no cost. They were leasing it anyhow. There will be a council workshop on May 16th. For the WIDSEF will be presenting for the City Hall to either add on an expansion or build new, so that will be a 2-hour workshop. There was a classification of tax forfeited properties which passed, and the council voted for the annual Board of Appeals of Crow Wing County, where residents can come and speak to try, get property values lower if they feel it's too high. The council went to an open book format just because we felt we're not qualified to make those judgment calls, and that's why we did what we did. Other than that, that was really pretty much it.
Any questions for Steve? No. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
All right, we're going to move on to our first open forum. If you would like to approach the podium, please state your name and address. If there is a topic that is already on the agenda, you can speak during that portion. So this would be for anything that is not currently on the agenda. All right, we'll go ahead and close the open forum and move on to new business. So first item up is a public hearing for a variance application V23001, Schmidt Brothers Holdings LLC. And we will open up the public hearing and start with the applicant presentation. So if you'd please approach the podium and state your name and address.
Hi, my name is Darren Schmidt. We're Schmidt Brothers Holdings and Schmidt Roofing. I'm going to apologize right now for if I have to clear my throat. My allergies have not been doing well over the past week. But anyway, My address is 7434 Fairway Lane, Breezy Point, Minnesota. And we're, excuse me, we're applying for variance for, we want to be able to build a cabin on County Road 4. So just to give you a bit of background, how we got to this point, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. We purchased a home on Eagle Lane, and with it came one of the lots that we're talking about this evening. And we didn't think that much of it. We thought, well, you know, maybe we can use that to build a dock. And so that's basically what we were looking into. And then we thought, you know, maybe we could put a racquetball court or a pickleball court there. Dress it up and put a pickleball court. Well, when we talked to a few people, we realized we cannot put a pickleball court there without a variance. So we did some more investigating, and we inquired about the 4 lots to the south of us, and we thought, you know, what if we bought those 4 lots? So we talked to a realtor, and we thought, well, maybe we could build a cabin. Well, once we did our investigation, we realized that if we would buy the 4 lots to our south, including the one we already have, we would need 4 variances for that. The lot that we currently had, that we acquired through the purchase of the house, we would need 7 variances. So I actually came in and talked to Jerry, and Jerry said, you know, you have to go through the variance process, and nothing's a guarantee. So I talked to Mr. Doty of Doty Builders, and we figured out, well, let's take it step by step. So we went and we got our lot, we had it surveyed, and we did all that, and we realized that if we bought 1 lot to the left of us, that we would only need 2 variances. 30 foot from the water and 30 foot from the road. So those were the 2 variances we were going to need. So we went ahead and we purchased the lot to the left of us. And so now we thought, you know, we actually have a shot to get these 2 variances. The next thing we did, we talked to the people about impervious coverage. We had Doty's do a plan, and you folks have all that. So we met the side setbacks, we met impervious coverage, we met everything except for those 2 things. And the wetland setback, I did some investigating on that as well, and most of the neighboring, you know, the lakes and so forth, most of them are 15 feet, Breezy's 30. So I thought, okay, well, if we were going to build a pickleball court, we would need 2 variances. If we build a house, we're going to need 2 variances. If we had all 6 lots, the 2 that we have, and we bought the other 4, we would still need 2 variances. So we could own 300 foot of shoreline and still need 2 variances. So I did some more digging, and I thought, you know, are these just outlots? What are they assessing these at? Well, they're assessing each lot at $118,500. That's what we're paying. That's the tax basis on them, on each one of those. And so Mr. Doty and I, we said, well, they have to let us build something, you would think. So we looked at the building envelope, we did everything we could, and we feel this is the least restrictive proposal that we've brought to you. We've met everything except for those 2 setbacks, so there's really nothing more that we can do on this, and so we're asking that we get 2 variances to build a house. Now, we have dealt with the stormwater issue and the landscaping, and you never have to worry about us having knee-high grass or anything like that. We're building a modest home. Now, granted, the prices for this modest home are not modest, but we're building what we feel is a average house or cabin, and we will take care of it. It will look nice, and I feel it'll dress up that little spot on County Road 4 there. So I don't know what else to say except for, well, I do have one last thing to say. So I'm sure I don't have to give you folks a history lesson, but when we did some digging, these lots in 65 were developed. In 65, that's when these lots were made. In 72, there came a city ordinance, or the city ordinance came to be. Well, now those lots no longer were buildable, basically. Then, in 78, they went ahead and put sewer stubs on each one of those lots. Well, somebody had to pay for those sewer stubs. And as a matter of fact, one of the 2 properties that we're on, that we've have, the lady had an assessment from 78 to 98 of $117 to pay for those sewer stubs. So it seems that those lots, when they created those lots, they created them to be built on. And now, with the ordinances and the setbacks the way they are, there's no possible way to build a house on those lots. It's impossible. I talked to Mr. Meister, who did the high water mark. I talked to Whitseth, and some of them are overlapping. I mean, there's like no building envelope. So if we can't build on there, and then I don't know what the variance process is for, because I feel like the variance process that was created in 78 was for this project. And that's about all I can say. So thank you for your time.
Does anyone have questions for him at this moment? All right. We may call you back up after we hear some of the other reports.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to staff review. Jerry.
Again, the variance request is 2023-001. The applicant is Darren Schmidt, Schmidt Brothers Holding, LLC. The legal description of the property is lots 13 and 14, the 18th addition to Breezy Points Estates. There is no current address there yet, but it will be, that would be applied for if in fact there is a building permit drawn at some time. The PID numbers are 102-11048 and 102-11049. The present zoning is R2, medium density. It does have access to municipal sewer. The applicable codes are 153.004A, 153.120, 153.044, and 153.045. The request is to construct a dwelling and attached garage 13 feet from the right-of-way of County Road 4, 15 feet from the delineated wetland on the lakeside. The property is 2 vacant lots that were created in 1965 as part of the 18th addition to Breezy Point Estates. The property is located between 29442 and 29372 County Road 4. Those are existing structures that are there today. Those are the closest structures to the lots that we're talking about. Mr. Schmidt acquired Lot 14 as part of a larger real estate transaction in 2022, and the intent is to consolidate lots 13 and 14. Portions of the property are located in a designated flood zone. The total square footage of the combined lots is 13,285. There is a survey in your packet that shows the lot itself, or the 2 lots itself. Mr. Schmidt is requesting variances to allow dwelling on construction of property that does not contain a building envelope. There would be adequate room for side yard setbacks, but there is no front or rear or right-of-way setback under the current ordinance. The variance requested is a wetland 15 feet, right-of-way 13 feet. The setbacks per the zoning ordinance, 35 feet from the right-of-way of County Road 4, side 10, wetland 30, impervious coverage is 25%. The setback from the OHW is 50, and the lot size of the existing lot is 15,000 square feet. Variance of legally permitted deviation is provided by MS 462.357, subdivision 6, as it may be amended from time to time from provisions of this chapter as deemed necessary by the Board of Adjustment when strict interpretation of the ordinance would create a practical difficulty and be impractical because of circumstances relating to lot size, shape, topography, or other characteristics of the property, and when the deviation from the ordinance with an attached condition will still be in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. Variances cannot create a land use not permitted in the zone. Variances shall be decided within a reasonable time with considerations for the following. The strict interpretation of the ordinance would be impractical. The deviation from the ordinance with any attached conditions will still be in keeping with the spirit and the intent of the ordinance. The land use created by the variance is permitted in the zoning district. The variance will not alter the essential character of the locality, and the variance is not for economic reasons alone, but reasonable use of the property does not exist under the ordinance. The applicant intends that the practical difficulty is we have not determined, or the applicant hasn't provided that practical difficulty at this time. I think that might be another question. The building envelope does not exist, but for the use of variances, the proposed impervious coverage is 23.85%. The closest dwellings on either side of the proposed structure, on the north side, the dwelling is 47 feet plus or minus from the right-of-way, and on the south, the dwelling is 50 feet plus or minus from the right-of-way line. The proposed use is a permitted use in the R2 zone. Proposed plans have been submitted to the DNR, City Attorney, Crow Wing County Highway and Wetlands. Mailed and published notice of the hearing has been done. The hearing is being held as we speak. And one alternative that may exist to a variance would be the applicant could consider pursuing a wetland replacement program whereby a small portion of the delineated wetland is filled, and the plan may utilize purchase of wetland credits or creation of additional wetlands within the watershed. That might be an alternative. The following may be used to support denial of the variance. The Planning Commission Board of Adjustment finds that no practical difficulty exists. The property is unbuildable because it lacks an acceptable building envelope, and lake access is a reasonable use of the property. Applicant could create wetland replacement plan to negate the need for variances or minimize the variances. Following may be used to support the approval of a variance request. The subdivision was created prior to the zoning and subdivision regulations in 1965. Municipal sewer was installed in County Road 4 in 1978. The lots were special assessed for the sanitary sewer. Impervious coverage is less than 25%. The request is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the official controls and consistent with the comprehensive plan. The property owner is proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner. The plight of the owner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the owner. The variance was granted if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. Practical difficulty is to be determined. If approving, the following conditions may be part of approval. Minimum elevation of the lowest floor, 1210. Elevation and building setbacks to be set and staked by a registered surveyor. Proposed stormwater management plan must be implemented by the time of permit expiration or upon substantial completion of the project. Certificate of occupancy, whichever is sooner. The existing gravel from the front lake side of the proposed patio lakeward must be removed by the time the permit expiration or substantial completion of the project, whichever is sooner. Within the shore impact zone, which is 37.5 feet from the OHW, the area of gravel removal must be reseeded to approved native natural seed mix for shoreline buffer protection, except for an 8-foot corridor to allow for a 4-foot walkway. No portion of the proposed dwelling shall be below the base flood elevation. Both lots must be consolidated at the time of the permit application to avoid after the property line encroachments, and building permit to be obtained prior to, and building to conform to Minnesota State Building Code. And there is a current wetland infraction out there that needs to be rectified at the time. The board may by resolution choose to approve, deny, modify the request of variance. The resolution should clearly state the practical difficulty and the reasons for approval, denial, or modification of the variance.
Jerry, with this, I'm slightly familiar with the wetland replacement plan. Do you have any additional thoughts on that? Has there been any, to your knowledge, any consideration for that? Because typically with the variance, if there are alternative options, we want to at least seek those out first.
That came up very late in this whole review process, and we haven't investigated that, but that would be something that the applicant could investigate to look into. We do currently contract with Crow Wing County to do our wetland, any enforcement and or replacement plans. That would need to be coordinated with them.
And in reviewing this, it looks like truly there is not any building envelope. If we go 35 feet from the road and from the wetland 30 feet, there isn't any space.
I think if it's indicated on the survey where there's two lines that kind of come together, and there might be a little triangle that's minimal.
Does anyone else have questions or still contemplating?
Jerry, could you go over those letters very quickly? The letter from,
There is a response from the city attorney, who basically states that it qualifies as some, it qualifies statutorily with what a variance is supposed to be for. There is a letter from the wetland folks that address the violation that was there and any future action. There is a letter from the DNR, again, it's more concerned about past violation than anything. And there is a letter from the Crow Wing County Highway Department, which opposes the right-of-way variance because they feel it's too close to the right-of-way. That's in essence the feedback we've gotten.
Is there any feedback or thoughts on what originally the intent was when city sewer went down that road? Is it normal that any lot there would automatically have that on there, or was there a process of determining which lots would have been buildable at the time to allow for having sewer, or what was kind of, does anyone have?
I think they looked at every lot that was there and they just said that we're going to do a sewer stub into each one. The rules back in '78 were a lot different than they are today. Back in those days, they were filling wetlands like we're going out of style, and they were making lots, and not only in town, but even farmers were filling wetlands and taking them, putting them into production. So wetlands weren't as valuable at the time that they did that. And homes weren't as big. They weren't being used as much. And they were weekend type little getaways, retreats. Times have changed.
and I assume that at that time, we did not have a 30-foot high water setback.
Well, we don't have an OHW. We have a 50-foot OHW setback. That does not come into play here because it's the 30-foot from the delineated wetland.
Wetland, okay.
I don't know when that requirement came in. I'm assuming it was probably when the wetland rules came in and those type of things changed. I think the impetus was to, again, try to preserve as much of the wetlands as possible.
And as far as the comments from Crow Wing regarding the road right-of-way, from what I understand is that they have their own request to have so much of a right-of-way because they do maintenance. There's things that they need to have space for, that if there was a building there that could prevent them from doing, I would guess, things like snow pile up and that type of maintenance that they may need.
Well, typically they don't want to see cars parked on the right-of-way portion. They want to have the ability to maintain the county road and keep flow going.
So this is also our time here for the commission to kind of talk amongst ourselves on any questions or thoughts that we have too.
So Jerry, on the proposed patio, that's actually closer to the wetland even than 15 feet. I mean, that's like.
We talk about structures, we're not talking about patios,
Right,
quite
but it's
frankly.
still a hard
yeah.
surface, but.
So amongst ourselves, I think some of the things we have to discuss or look at is what is the true need for this? What is the practical difficulty that we want to probably address? And then just in general case of taking into consideration the road right away, to me, that's important to consider what Crow Wing County has for their needs to be able to maintain the roads.
They're not saying an exact number, they just wanted a little more close to the number that they're typically have, correct?
They're just commenting that they feel it's too close to the road.
Right. If the house was narrower, you'd gain a little bit, but.
Well, there's another issue there.
Yeah.
There's a minimum size requirement in our ordinance for
Right,
houses. If you don't have, it has to be at least 26 feet wide.
right. 27, yeah.
So if you
You'd
were to
gain a
shorten,
foot.
if you were to shorten that up, make the building shorter, then you need another variance beside, that would be a third variance that would be necessary.
Is it possible to have the applicant back up to the podium to let us know what the practical difficulty is? I mean, it's fairly obvious, but at least it's on record. The applicant is stating so.
Yes, actually, if you wouldn't mind, please. And restate your name for the record, just so they have it on file.
Darren Schmidt. So we met with Whitseth, John Doty and I met with the surveyor, I met with Ben Meister. We looked at every possible scenario, and like Jerry just stated, we have to have 26 minimum, and the only way we could do this is to build this house. And that's why I stated earlier, I feel like this is the least restrictive way to do this. Now, one thing I wanted to, and I don't know if I'm allowed to speak on something that Jerry had said. So I'm not aware of a previous, whatever you were talking about, a previous fine or something.
I'm told by the wetland people that there is still a violation out there, and it hasn't been resolved.
Okay, well, this is the first I've heard of it.
Well, and it's new information for us also, because there was a stop order that was done.
Okay, that was when we were building, we were making room for a deck, or for a dock, and they went and we talked to the DNR, we got a permit, and we had a 15-foot right-of-way, and apparently, instead of taking them out a certain way, they pulled them on shore or something. We didn't know anything about that, so we talked to the DNR guy, and he said that the company was being fined. So if they haven't paid their fine, then we will pay it. We haven't heard about this since last September or whenever it happened.
Well, and I think that part of the problem is that the people that were handling the wetland issues, the personnel have changed.
Okay.
So.
Well, whatever it is, I'll pay it.
It was identified in the response from the DNR.
Okay.
And I think it's.
Well, we've never received a bill on it. So
I don't know that you're going to get a bill. I think you're probably going to get some kind of remedial action from them as far as what you have to do to solve the problem.
Okay.
But.
And then your second point about what we could do to help with the seeding or whatever you were saying, we would be willing to do whatever it takes to make this work. So whatever we need to do, if you want to have a private meeting with me and tell me what I need to do, I would do that.
I don't think we're at that point right now.
Okay, okay.
I think these were suggestions. If in fact the board were to agree that a variance should be issued, those were suggested conditions of the issuance of the variance.
Okay,
Okay. We're not there
okay,
yet.
okay. And then the last point was about the road. And if you drive by those lots, there's a wood buffer that comes along there. And now ours doesn't have that anymore. But from there, so from the center of the road, 35 foot, then there would be, so we're basically 50 foot from the road. They could come Mach 90 down that road plowing snow and they're not gonna disturb us. And we would never be parking on the road. We have a driveway and we have everything for that. So our cars would never be there. So that was my point on that.
Could you clarify, just quickly for us, the practical difficulty? If we were to say the practical difficulty is,
Well-
how would you sum that up?
Okay, the practical difficulty that I see is there's no building envelope. And to meet all the restrictions, we need 2 variances. And like I said earlier, if we purchased the other 4, if we had 6 lots along that stretch, 300 foot of shoreline, we still need 2 variances. So we did what we could. We bought the other lot, so we have 2 lots, and because that lot is on the part of the road where it's a little bit wider, now we only need 2 variances. So there's nothing more we can do without, like you suggest, or whoever suggested, making the house smaller, but then we're gonna need another variance for that. So it's basically, we feel like we've done what we can, and now I guess it's up to you folks, so.
Anyone else have questions?
All right now. Thank you.
Question of Jerry.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Jerry, if there was an exchange of wetlands and a filling in of this wetland, does that potentially remove that setback issue?
It could,
Okay.
depending upon how much was approved and whether you got enough credits. And typically, it's if you take out an acre, you have to create 2 acres. You have to, and that has to be created within the same watershed district, and or in some cases, folks that fill wetlands do buy wetland credits from other places that have created new wetlands. There's actually people that sell those type of things. That could solve some of the setback issues.
So it doesn't
Or
have
it
to
could
be
minimize them.
It doesn't have to be on the same lot.
It does not have to be on the same lot. It has to be in the same watershed, and it has to be approved by Soil and Water Conservation, the DNR, and I believe it's the county also. The whole process that you have to go through in order to do that. The last one I've seen in Breezy was a situation on Lake Osawatomie where they actually filled some wetland to have a building or a cabin, and they bought wetland credits from someplace else within the watershed.
There's actually 3 variances. He keeps saying 2, isn't there 3? The lot size is too small too.
Well,
But that doesn't really matter, I guess, huh?
no, not with the sewer.
Oh, okay. So you're saying if he had a 10,000 square foot lot, and it's city sewer, that'd be okay?
We allow smaller lots if they have sewer and can meet setbacks. In this case, they're asking for variances to the setbacks.
Right. So, still confused on that part, but whatever.
Does anyone have more questions at this time, or should we proceed to the public input?
I think we can
I
proceed.
think that would help us to hear public input.
All right, we will now move to the public input portion. So if anyone in the audience would like to approach the podium, state your name, address, and feel free to share your input.
Good evening. I'm Chris Christofek. I live at 29297 Piney Way in Breezy. I look forward to having a new neighbor in our neighborhood. Certainly have no issues or problems with the Smiths in any way, shape, or form. The problem I have is with the property and where it sits, the proposed development, and how it is going to be placed upon that property. Years ago, well before most of us were here, these were tax forfeited lots for a variety of reasons. When one purchases property, regardless of where it's at, he needs to be aware of the issues that may be encumbered with that property. And that certainly is the case here. It is way too small to build a 1,600-foot building. It's way too close to the water. It's way too close to the highway, to the right-of-way, all of which have been commented by the watershed people and Crow Wing County. He's aware of those issues and made those comments in his remarks that he was aware of those problems and has tried to mitigate that. Prior to his application for the variance, he began to fill that property, which was a swamp, with gravel and dirt and so on, in order to make what I thought was a driveway. There was a curb cut that was allowed from the county highway, and it looked like it was going to be nothing more than a place to turn a boat around and gain access to the water. Subsequent to that, a contractor was employed to remove vegetation from the shoreline out to open water. I have no idea how long that is, but it's in the 200 to 250 foot range, and that's a guess. I don't know that as an exact, but it's quite a distance. I'm not sure the width of that clearing, but the DNR issued a stop order because of the equipment being used to clear that vegetation. It was apparently the wrong equipment that had been suggested to be used. So the city has previously denied other side yard setbacks, variances, and in one case I'm aware of 7 square feet on a side yard, caused a complete redraw of a property. I think in this case, this property is not buildable. The envelope that you saw, the building envelope that you saw on the Woodseth drawing is exceedingly small, and it just isn't, it's just not going to fit. The other question that I would ask that you've determined, is this going to be a permanent residency that the Smiths are going to live in, or is this going to be a seasonal recreational rental property? With that, I respect your decision. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to approach the podium?
Jeff Johnson, 31051 Palmer Court. And I would just like to remind the commission about the assessments that the owners have paid for those lots, the sewer stubs that are on both lots. And I think they should be allowed to do something with the property, and this seems like a best use of it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I invite anyone else who would like to come up and share their thoughts. All right, we're going to go ahead and close the public input portion and close the public hearing. We're going to move on to official action for the variance application. And we can start with some discussion here amongst the commission. If anyone would like to make a motion, you're certainly welcome to at this point.
Me? Well, I see what he's saying about the setbacks, and I realize whatever you want, like the roadway is 13 feet, supposed to be 35 feet, so it's not a variance, it's kind of a wish, I think. It's kind of a, you wish the road was further away. I mean, unfortunately, it's a lot, you know? It's asking a lot, I think, from the wetland, that's half what it needs to be and so forth, so I don't know. It's a big house on a small lot.
Which we require,
Right.
Right,
the size of the lot.
right.
And I think if he can gain back 15 feet of that wetlands by buying wetland credit elsewhere, so then he is at the 30 feet, then he's really only asking for one variance, which would be the front of the house, would make me feel a little bit better moving forward if that were the decision.
I know he needs to redesign it, but if he moved that stairway in, that would add 4 feet to the roadside. That would be 17 feet instead of 13 feet,
Is that where they're measuring to?
or more or less. But that's just throwing ideas out there, so.
Well, I was thinking the same thing. If, with the variance process, typically we're required to look at all options before approval. If there is another option like the wetland credits, to at least explore that first before granting a variance, just to make sure that we have approached all different options to try to bring it into compliance as much as we possibly can. So,
Right.
because otherwise, just looking at this, to me, it's like there really is, it wasn't intended to be a buildable lot. It was purchased without the intent to have it be a buildable lot. So I think, the intent may have changed after the purchase, but initially, it certainly wasn't a lot that was designed to be built on with those setbacks. So I'm in agreement that I think at least exploring that wetland credit would give us a little bit more space to be able to meet perhaps one of those setbacks, the wetland. And then just maybe looking at that right away and ensuring that, we look at making sure that it's at least as approachable. If maybe moving the stairway would give us a little extra space, maybe that's another way of gaining a couple of feet there too.
I mean, that goofs up their plan, but the lot's a difficult lot. Just looking at the building envelope, how small that is.
Yeah, it's a triangle. What are you thinking?
I'm agreeing with Teddy. I think if we can make some real progress on the setbacks with a wetland exchange, I could support this.
So one question, would that be, if we want to make that request, would this be a denial of this, or would this be going, how would you phrase that?
Okay, number one, this application was filed on April 17th, and we have 60 days to make a determination on that. So you have another 30 days to work with. I think you can probably table the request for further exploration of wetlands and credits and those type of things, and maybe go there
have the applicant report back at your next meeting and take it under consideration for a final action at the next meeting.
I would make
I
that
think that
motion.
would also give you some time to maybe visit the lot again, take a look at it and see what's out there and maybe screw it around a little bit and see if you can come up with some other ideas.
So would that be a motion for us to approve to be able to table it for the next meeting?
Table for consideration at the next meeting.
And I would make that motion. Table. Pardon?
Do you want to state the motion to officially make that motion?
Jerry, would you restate that, and that would be my motion?
Tabling action on variance V23-001 for further study and action at the June meeting.
That's my,
So we
wording
have,
would be my motion.
so we have a motion to place a temporarily hold to research and find some more information on this and then revisit this on the June meeting. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Do we, all in favor say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion has passed. Okay, moving on to the next, we're going to open the public hearing for variance application V23002 for Christopher Cullen. I would invite the applicant to approach the podium, state your name and address, and presentation.
Chris Cullen, address 31310 Summer Drive. I think that's the longest I've sat all day without talking, so. I appreciate you guys taking a look at my variance, and I appreciate your time. Basically I purchased 2 lots with the intent to build a spec home on the property. And when I went to put my application in, I realized that I was about 785 square feet too short from being able to do so. We meet all setbacks from the property. We have 2 different site locations for septic systems. We have a place for the well. And we also could design the home to come in from 2 different entrances, one off Aspen and one off of Birch Lane. The home that would be built is a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home with a 2-stall attached garage. Has a sunroom, about a 12 by 12 sunroom, and then a patio off the back, which is also 12 by 12. It has LP or luxury vinyl plank flooring, white trim, stainless steel appliances with granite countertops throughout. It makes for very nice 1-level living. Has a good flow to it. This would be the 5th one we've built. All of them have been aesthetically pleasing to the neighborhood and brought great people to the community. So in addition to that, like I say, we do have a couple different variations of this plan that we could make to make it comfortable for the city and still fit within the buildable within the buildable envelope. The only issue that we have is, like I say, you know, on the city ordinance, and Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, 20,000 square feet is what we'd require for this. But you guys do over the counter for 20%, which would put me at 16,000, is that right? And I'm at, I think, 15,350 or something like that. So, or 15,314, there it is. So, just a little bit short on what I would need to build. So, that's what I'm here looking for today. So.
Any questions?
The well and the sewer are able to be far enough apart per?
Yep, correct. So 50 feet is the minimum on a deep well, and we would have easily 2 septic locations and easily exceed the 50-foot minimum requirement on a deep well.
Okay.
Yep.
Why 2 septics?
Whenever you have to have, whenever you, well, pretty much I think on any septic system that's replaced, you have to have 2 different you have to have two different plans for your drain field. And on new construction.
The way I understood it was you said two different septics.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Basically, what I was saying is that I'm still able to stay within the footprint and meet
Right.
all other requirements that would be for this home. We're able to meet all of the minimum home requirements, the buildable envelope, everything else about this property fits into what the city would want to see built. Like I say, just a little bit small on the square footage of the lot.
Can you state for the record what the practical difficulty would be?
Yeah, so the practical difficulty was that the lots were probably down around that same area that Mr. Darren Schmidt had said. And when they were originally developed, they were buildable lots. And then the city had changed through the years, they changed the ordinances, which now makes them unconforming lots for building. So the practical difficulty would be that I bought them and I can't do anything with them, aside from, I guess, so.
Is your intent to rent, sell, live?
The intent is to sell the property. So what I would do with this one is we would sell, like I say, this is the fifth one that we've had. Every one of the ones that we've sold, I've done a development up in Pine River, done a few, did one over in Breezy Point already. And then some other models that were similar on a different, and every one of them that you drive by right now have been improved on. They've got flowers, green grass, they all look really nice. So they really would fit in with Breezy Point. And the buyers that are generally coming, it's a great house because it's big enough for a family, a young family. It's also small enough for maybe retirement people that want to live in a single level home and have all their amenities on one level. So it's kind of a one size fits all home, and we've had a lot of good luck with the property. So.
Just to confirm, was this a rental property or a place that you're going to sell?
It is going to be sold.
Okay.
Yep, it would be sold. There's no intent of doing any kind of vacation rental or any rental. I don't want to hold it, so. Yeah, it would be sold. In fact, on this one, I probably would list it, if I were to get the variance, I would probably have it sold prior to, and then the buyer would be allowed to come in, and if they wanted to upgrade cabinets, counters, we'd be able to work with them, and it would, like I say, be very aesthetically pleasing, with all the other ones that we've done, so.
Is there city sewer and water close?
There is on County Road 11, so it's kind of right behind. I did explore with the city, Jerry, and then also the Public Works. In fact, I even said I'd dig it in to get around the corner, but unfortunately, it's just too far outside of what the city scope would allow, and once we do that, or once you guys would allow that, then it would be kind of.
You wouldn't need the variance because the lot size would change.
I would actually, if I had city sewer, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think I could build on both of them if I had city sewer there. Is that right, Jerry?
As long as you met setbacks.
I'd be able to meet setbacks and I'd be able to build two of these properties on there. So this would be built in the middle of both of them. And like I say, if there was a preference on where you wanted the driveway to come in, we've got two different models on this that we could do.
And the corner one might be difficult to meet the setbacks though and build something on.
For what's that?
Because there's two front yard setbacks on two sides.
Okay, yeah, on Aspen and Birch, yeah. That could be a little challenging, yeah.
So there is no sewer on Birch.
Pardon?
The sewer's still out on 4 yet, right?
Correct, yes.
Lakeside.
It's on, the city is actually on Birch. The closest city connection is right off of Birch and County Road 11, which would be
Right.
on the northwest corner
Right.
of that
That'd be a
intersection.
long ways away.
Yeah, so there's one connection there that, like I say, I would be willing to even dig to and connect to, but that's just, I think, opening Pandora's box for the city, so.
So you have requested it?
Yes, I have.
added?
Yep, I've explored all other options with these lots.
So you've exhausted that option?
Yeah, I'm kind of down to like, my kids are going to inherit these if I can't do something with them, so. And then they'll go talk to the local realtor and he'll say, well, what did you pay? So.
I don't have any more questions.
All right, thank you.
Yep, thank you, guys.
We may call you back up if that's okay.
Yeah, yep, you bet.
Thank you. And moving on to staff review, Jerry, you can take this over.
This variance request is 2023-002. The applicant is Chris Cullen. Legal descriptions of lot 82 and 83, the fourth addition to Breezy Points Estates. Again, there's no address until building permit gets issued. The PID number is 102-108-49. The zoning of the property is R3, original neighborhood. The applicable codes is 153.033, 153.044, 153.045, and 153.006A. The request is to construct a dwelling and attached garage on consolidated lots 82 and 83. The parcel is 15,215 square feet. 20,000 square feet is the required lot size by ordinance. Pre-existing lots qualify for less if at least 80% of the lot is 16,000. The requested variance is from 16,000 to 15,215 square feet. The applicant is proposing on-site septic and on-site well. Property is located in the southeast corner of Aspen Lane and Birch Lane. Lots 82 and 83 have been consolidated and again equal 15,315 square feet. Municipal sanitary sewer is currently located at Birch Lane and County Road 4 and or Lakeshore Drive and Aspen Lane. That would be to the south of this property. The property is currently zoned original neighborhood. Lot size requirements for original neighborhood, 20,000 square feet, right of way 35 feet, rear 35 feet, side 10 and 15, impervious coverage 25%, and the building height of 35 feet. Again, a variance is a legally permitted deviation as provided by MS 462.357 and may be amended from time to time from the provision of this chapter as deemed necessary by the Board of Adjustment when strict interpretation of the ordinance would create practical difficulty and be impractical because of circumstances relating to lot size, shape, topography, or other characteristics of the property, and when the deviation from the ordinance with any attached conditions will still be in keeping with the spirit and the intent of the ordinance. Variances cannot create a land use not permitted by the ordinance. Variance review shall be decided within a reasonable time. Again, the strict interpretation of the ordinance would be impractical. Deviation from the ordinance with any attached conditions will be in keeping with the spirit of the ordinance. The land use created by the variance is permitted in the zoning district. The variance will not alter the essential character of the locality, and the variance is not for economic reasons alone, but reasonable use of the property does not exist under the ordinance. 153.006 stipulates the use of pre-existing lots. The outside of shoreland, a pre-existing lot of record shall be considered for a zoning permit without requiring a variance for a lot size, provided it has at least 80% of the required lot area and the lot width is deemed by ordinance. All required zoning provisions can be met, and the sanitary provisions can be met, and sanitary provisions for well and septic can be maintained. And that is the variance that he's asking for, is to deviate from 20 to 16 to less than 16. The current allows for the deviation to 16,000 square feet. The question is, should a further deviation be allowed through the use of variance? If so, how much? The other question is, if further deviations are to be allowed, might a better alternative be the revisions of the percentage in a revision to the ordinance rather than a variance for each individual property? We have, in many instances, especially along Terminal Road and some other folks, where they are required to get 3 lots together to, just to get 13, or 16%, or the 16,000 square feet. Finding, the applicant contends that the practical difficulty is the size of the lot. Proposed structure meets applicable setbacks. The impervious coverage is proposed to be 17%. Site plan indicates a building envelope. The proposed parcel is 76.5% of the 16,000 square feet allowable. The following may be used to support denial of the variance. Planning Commission Board of Adjustment finds that no practical difficulty exists. Future expansion of municipal sewer in Aspen Lane and Birch Lane will be under consideration. The city is currently looking at sewer expansions throughout the community and where that is practical. The Planning Commission Board of Adjustment means the following to support approval. The property pre-exists current subdivision and zoning regulations. The impervious coverage does not exceed 25%. Practical difficulty is the size of the lot. The proposed structure conforms to setbacks, and the proposed use is a reasonable use and consistent with the neighboring properties. If approved, the following may be used to support the approval of the variance. Building permit to be obtained, structure to conform to site plan submitted, Minnesota State Building Codes to apply.
Are we at with the review of places for sewer expansion? I know that's been on the agenda, but what's the timeframe kind of looking at?
So at this point, Madam Chair, so what Jerry was talking about, we're in a sewer study right now with Widseth, looking at first and foremost, what do we need for our septic, our sewer plant with our current stubs and what we have out there. And then looking at future, you know, if the council wanted to expand. At this point, we're still probably looking, before we have any kind of report, probably still looking end of summer. So we're still probably 3-4 months out before we're getting into that kind of information of where potential expansion areas might be.
So there is no variance, Jerry, from 20 to 16.
There's no variance necessary from 20 to 16. It's actually a pre-granted variance.
Right. And the square foot he has is 15,215 or 15,315, one of the two.
I believe it's 315, quite
Is it?
frankly.
So it's 685.
But it meets everything else, other than just the lot size.
Correct.
So if city sewer was to go in, do you have to hook up?
Well, that,
That would obviously be a policy decision from the city council.
Oh.
But historically, once city sewer would be put in to an area, how it's been handled in the past is property owners would have a certain amount of time to hook up, or there would be triggering events. Like if their septic were to fail, that would be a triggering event. I know one of the last times the city put in sewer, again, they kind of went property by property and looked at that property and said, okay, how old is their septic? Or how new is their septic? If it's a newer septic, they gave them 15 years, because that's the average lifetime of a septic tank, to connect, or their sewer fails, or another one is the property sells, a transition in ownership. So, no, the answer is they would have to connect at eventually, is the normal practice, but not necessarily immediately.
Anyone have other questions? All right, and we're going to move over to the public input, and I just want to call out that we do have a letter to the Planning and Zoning Commission that we have on record, just stating some concerns that another citizen that, resident that is on that lane has shared with us, which is up on the screen as well. Would open this up to any public input, so if anyone would like to make comments, share their input, please come to the podium, state your name and address, please.
Just open it up. Maury Wallers, 8871 Birch Lane. If I heard Chris right, he was saying, if I heard him right, that if you had sewer on Birch Lane or Aspen Lane, you could build on both of those lots. Not so, I don't think. Because the lots on Aspen Lane, backing up to 4, were sold tax forfeit, double lots per Breezy Point. The contractor tried to split them with the county or the Breezy Point, would not allow splitting those lots to make them individual 4 lots, 4 houses, so that didn't happen. So that, I gotta question that. There's things going on in that community that look like we're getting some rental property going on. And if you look at what's going on in Bacchus, they're looking at this rental property, this rental vacation stuff, not favorably. So we have to consider some of that. It's going to happen on Aspen Lane on the corner of Lakeshore Drive. It's going to be a vacation place, summer, hopefully in the winter if he can rent it out. Who knows what's going to happen there. So he wanted me to sell him 700 or 7 feet off the property to the south. I says, no. I says, you go get a variance. I'm not going to split them lots up and make my lots shorter. So this is where he's at. He's trying to get a variance now to build a house. I don't know if the house is going to face Birch Lane or if it's going to face Aspen Lane. I haven't heard where that's at, or does anybody know?
I don't think it's for certain. I think he has 2 options. He has 2 options that he could lay the house out on.
Okay,
And looking at the drawing, then Mr. Chansky, I don't know if you have that or not.
okay. I just hadn't heard, didn't know. But it should be public interest, information, I think. Yeah.
There isn't a site plan that I see, right?
Pardon?
We don't have a site plan or a plot plan or anything.
Well, we do have something, and it didn't get in the package.
Oh, it did? Oh.
But I think we can probably find one real quick.
I've got 2 really big ones right here. Let me bring them up, so you can see what we're doing here. I don't know where I bring them.
If you
There's
give
a
Deb,
camera straight above.
if you give Deb just a moment, she'll get the document camera put up.
Aspen or?
Put them both right there, okay.
So where's the garage?
Okay, so here's the garage right here. So we've got Aspen.
Hold
Lane
on
right
one
here.
second, please.
Okay.
Just give Deb a second, she'll get the document camera turned on.
What? Oh, okay.
You can, Maury, can you move the microphone, just, or
Okay,
Chris?
So right here we have Aspen Lane.
Yep.
Here we have Birch. County Road 4 would be up on this side. So currently we have where the driveway would come off of Aspen Lane.
Okay.
We could easily, we've got another model that actually has the driveway right here and it comes in this way.
From
This
Birch
one,
Lane?
this one I believe is a little more aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
Has an extra kind of, what am I trying to say, over the garage there.
Okay.
Yeah, this one, the model here, actually, that one looks really sharp. They both do, but this one comes off
Okay.
of Birch Lane. So I mean, we could do it either way, so.
Okay. Good. Let's see what else I got. Maybe that's all for right now. I have to leave somebody else a shot at. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. If anyone else in the audience would like to approach the podium, please do so.
Hi, my name is Chris Dietz. My husband Tom and I live at 29699 Aspen Lane in Breezy Point. In the summer of 2021, Chris Cullen and Travis Hofarth approached my driveway in a golf cart. They engaged me in a conversation. I mentioned his for sale sign on the land directly across from the very small road from my driveway. I told them that I was not happy to see this, as I enjoy the trees and wildlife here. Chris told me that he was considering buying the land and building a very small home there to rent out, verbatim. I told him this was even worse news to me. The road is not wide, the parcels are not large. There are currently only 3 homes on Aspen Lane. This is because Aspen Lane, in my opinion, is not large enough to support additional homes. The zoning ordinance is clear. It exists for a reason. These lots are less than the 16,000 square feet. I would invite you to drive down Aspen Lane and look at the lots. Look at the proximity to mine and my neighbor's driveway. Please consider the safety of my neighbor's 3 kids. Please consider the peace and quiet that will likely be disrupted by having a rental with strangers in and out all season. I do believe this will be a rental property. In addition to the lots referenced above, Chris Cullen recently purchased the home at 29641 Aspen Lane. This home is on the corner of Aspen and Lakeshore Drive. We believe the intent is to turn this small cabin into yet another rental. Tom and I enjoy the peaceful quiet of our little road. We respectfully ask the commission to deny Chris Cullen's request for a zoning variance. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to approach?
Maureen Wallers, 8871 Birch Lane. One more thing. I think I heard Dave say something about sewer, and sewer's been, Mr. Politnik had that all engineered and surveyed many years ago. In fact, it's in the file, the sewer for that Aspen Lane and Birch Lane. And the reason it hasn't gone forward is the price of the property isn't enough to warrant people living on the property, the people owning the property, to be able to afford it. I mean, it wouldn't, it's not feasible. So the engineering keeps going up all the time too, as far as, and the sewer project would keep going up, but it's a dead horse and waiting to swim. Thank you.
Anyone else would like to approach? All right, we're going to close the public hearing portion, and we will move on to the official action for the variance application of V23002. So we'll begin discussion with the commission.
Madam Chair, before we, Chris Dietz was here and spoke to you just previously, but we also have a written letter that should be marked as part of the record from her also.
I did reference that earlier. Do I need to make a special note too?
You have a copy, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, Jerry, she mentioned it earlier.
Pardon?
She referred to when she opened it. We're good on there. We're good regarding the letter.
Yeah.
All right, so we will go ahead and close the public hearing. We are on the official action variance application V23002. Do we have any motions at this point? Or more discussion?
Not from me. Administrator Chansky, you said 4 months to figure out where the sewer would be going, and I don't want to hold you to a timeline, but I'm just curious because that will affect, okay, well then when would the sewer actually be installed?
So on that, just clarification, 4 months is probably the earliest I expect to see some report from Winseth. I don't know, I can't speak to how, like, is that the final report or where we are at with that report? Again, the future expansion areas is kind of the part two, the secondary piece to that report. And I don't know how detailed, if it's going to be like specific streets or geographical areas. Once that is presented, however, the next step is really, it's a policy decision from the council of how they want to proceed in the future. Do they want to look at, the reasoning we're talking about, are there future expansion areas, goes back to looking at the sewer plant itself and making sure that we have enough capacity for the future. So the actual decisions of which streets in the future might get sewer, you're probably a ways off from that. 'Cause again, at the end of the day, those are policy decisions from the council, and more than likely those things get those, if a street is designated that, yeah, we want to put sewer there in the future, more than likely it would coincide with a street reconstruction. So that would kind of determine more than likely when it would go in there, unless there was a petition from property owners to put it in there prior to a road being reconstructed.
One of the reasons that it's even being brought to your attention is the fact that it is in such close proximity to this piece of property, and there aren't a lot of topographical constraints that would prohibit the extension of the sewer in this area. I think Mr. Wolders spoke to the fact that they've looked at that extension a long time ago. It can happen without a lot of lift stations and that type of thing. So it's a relatively neat expansion of the sewer system to service a bigger area than just one lot. But it's something that can be accomplished.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it would serve a lot of homes, obviously, in that area when it's put in.
Exactly.
But if that sewer are in, he doesn't need a variance because he meets the lot size.
Absolutely not.
No?
He needs no variances whatsoever.
Correct. Okay, just so we're clear, or I understand correctly, if he had sewer, we wouldn't be here talking about it right now. He could build on that lot.
That's exactly right.
So the question I kind of have is that these were recently purchased, knowing that they did not conform to lot size. So there is a possibility of sewer. That could be an alternative, but again, we don't know that that's an alternative. It's only a possibility at this point. So we can't say that there are other alternatives to explore at this point. It sounds like he has looked at all the other options that are available at this time.
Right.
I'm sure the sewer is years out too.
So the one question that I'm having is that it was purchased knowing that it wasn't meeting the requirements. And most of the time, if we're looking at something for a variance, a lot of times it's somebody that already pre-existed owning a piece of property, was trying to do something with that property, and because regulations have changed and things over time, that it wasn't allowable, and so there's a practical difficulty on that. This, though, I have a little bit of a concern that it was purchased knowing that it wasn't going to be within.
And I just wanted to add, just for fairness, Madam Chair, both Mr. Cullen and I think Mr. Maury also did identify that there was an attempt, at least of some level, to acquire enough land to make it.
So another way that it was, alternative options were pursued.
I think at this point, he's exhausted all of his options to build on that. And then if we choose not to approve it, it sits there forever and ever and ever and never gets built on, when the city could be gaining potential tax money from that as well. I mean, just thinking long-term, then that, if we don't approve it now, then is there any other future commissions board that will approve it? Or the ordinances have to change for someone to be able to build on that lot?
And the things in favor of it is everything else does meet all of this.
Setbacks and stuff. Right.
And it does sound like city sewer is available nearby, so if you kind of look at the whole area as a total, I don't think we have a lot of sewer type concerns in the area that we would be looking at for neighboring properties or anything like that on a load type scenario.
Maury was gonna ask a question, but you have to come up, I think, Maury. Or is that closed?
Order?
That's closed, I guess.
We'll reopen it briefly if you can keep.
One other comment, the people on Aspen Lane are all sewered to Highway 4. So that makes less people to pay for the sewer, because they've already got sewer, they don't need to pay for it again. So that's just the way it is.
All right, do we have anyone that's interested in making a motion at this time?
I'll let you do it, Teddy.
I'm just looking to see what, any other.
So it would probably be better to be built towards Birch. Of course, you could put the sewer through the side yard too. It doesn't have to go up the front yard, correct?
I think it can go to any side that you want it to go to.
Right, that's what I mean, yeah. Okay.
So if we look at reasons for accepting a variance, let's just kind of review that to help us. When strict interpretation would create a practical difficulty and be impractical because of circumstances relating to lot size, which is this case, shape, topography, and other characteristics of the property. When the deviation from the ordinance with any attached conditions will still be in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. And I think, personally, I think that it is keeping within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. It's a residential area. It is meant to be an area to build homes.
Right.
And he did indicate that this would be a home for sale, not a rental type unit. So I don't think that's necessarily a concern at this point, although what people do with their property, if it's allowable and somebody wants to do a long-term rental or whatnot, they certainly could, anybody could at any point in time. And does this variance, it cannot create a land use not permitted in the zone. It's residential, so it does appear to be something permitted in the zone. All options appear to have been explored. I don't think there's any alternatives that we've heard of that they would need to explore at this point. It's in keeping with the essential character of the locality. It looked like the site, the plans seem to be within normal building, residential home type establishment. The only thing I could say is the variance it would require it not to be for economic reasons alone. Selling the property would be an economic reason if it's a builder looking to have a profit from the sale of it. That is an economic reason. But reasonable use of the property does not exist under the ordinance. I would say there isn't really a different reasonable use of the property given where it's at. It's meant to be
in a neighborhood,
correct? Yeah. Hit all the good points there.
Anyone comfortable making a motion at this point?
I'll make a motion to approve variance 2023-002, provided the building permit to be obtained, structure to conform to site plan submitted by and Minnesota State Building Code.
Do we have a
Just
second?
as stated.
Do we have a second to that motion?
I will second the motion.
We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. All right, and we're next moving on to public hearing conditional use permit application C23002, Pat Pfeiffer. Will you please come to the podium, identify yourself, address, and present.
Good evening, Pat Pfeiffer, 29833 Lakeshore Drive. We are proposing an accessory structure on our property. It's a 30 by 32 building. We have conformed with all setbacks for the building. We're looking at making it the same color scheme as the home. We have a dark gray home, white trims. We're going to do the same thing with the structure. We are looking to get a conditional use permit. Apparently, and I was going to ask Jerry if this was correct, and maybe someone else can help me, but I believe the midline roof height is 15 feet, and I believe our structure is 16.5 feet at the midline roof height. Our house does sit on a walkout lot. It is a 1-story in the front, 2-story in the back. The structure sits kind of toward the back of the property. So it does sit closer to the 2-story. It is a 19-foot tall building. And I believe my current primary structure is 25 feet tall to the peak from the walkout level. And that's what we're looking at.
Does anyone have questions?
Would you use the same roof as the house, same shingles, whatever you have?
We actually are proposing a post frame building.
Oh, okay, so it's steel roof.
Yep.
Okay.
Steel roof, but we are looking at we have a black roof on our primary home, and we're doing a black roof on the accessory structure. We're doing a dark gray siding on the accessory structure, which also is dark gray on the house, the primary house.
So the variance, Jerry, is, I guess, is for 16.9 over 15 feet?
It's above 15 feet to the midpoint of the roof.
Right.
I think the request is because of the size of the garage door and the intent to put a camper in it. It's not something like we haven't dealt with many times before.
Right.
It sounds like there's quite a bit of elevation change between the roadway and where this will be, so it'll be, for the most part, hidden.
Yep, it's pretty
See
steep
the
drop.
roof.
Absolutely, yeah, it's down toward the bottom, like I said, it sits, my house sits on a pretty steep walkout lot.
Yep.
And the accessory building will be closer to the downside of that lot, so it sits down in the hole down there, yes. Yep.
Got it.
Any questions?
Are you gonna do like a wainscoting or anything on it, or just?
We're going with the darker structure. We were gonna do a wainscoting on it, and we thought with going with the darker structure. And on the front side of it, so we're not doing a wainscoting.
Okay.
But it is a dark gray building. We wanted it to be closer to what the house looked like, which we don't have on the house.
Right.
It's just dark gray. What I do wanna do on the roadside where the overhead door, because it is larger, it was gonna be white. We're gonna propose a black door on that, just so it's kind of more hidden. So black with the charcoal gray siding, it'll almost disappear to the side.
It'll look good that way.
Yep.
Any other questions? No. Thank you.
Thanks.
And moving on to staff review, Jerry.
This is conditional use permit application 2023-002. The applicant is Patrick Pfeiffer. The address is 29833 Lakeshore Drive. The PID number is 102-11159. Legal descriptions are lot 18 to 21, block 3, Breezy Point Club. The zoning of the property is R3. The applicable code is 153.033, original neighborhood. The request is to construct a detached accessory structure, 960 square feet, 15 to 20 feet in height. Applicant has submitted an application for a conditional use permit to construct the accessory structure up to 20 feet in height. Property is zoned R3. The property is 4 adjacent lots located at the corner of Lakeshore Drive and Bayview Place. The lots are consolidated with a home and an attached garage today. The review of the conditional use application is very similar to the variance, and I won't read through it and belabor you with that. It's just part of the review. The applicant has filed an appropriate application for a CUP. The applicant has paid the appropriate fee. Public notice of conditional use hearing was published in the legal newspaper, and property owners within 350 feet were given mailed notice of said hearing, and the public hearing is being held as we speak. Staff has reviewed the site plan, the CUP application, and determined that it is an appropriate CUP in the R3 district. Accessory structure height in excess of 15 to 20 feet in height. The following may be appropriate conditions for approval of the CUP. Applicant shall obtain a building permit for principal and accessory structure. Applicant shall comply with setback requirements. Siding and roofing of principal structure and accessory structure shall be of similar color, not necessarily material. All structures shall comply with state building code, height of accessory structure to match the height of the principal structure, and the height of accessory structure shall not exceed 20 feet. Just a note, we continue to get more and more requests for accessory structures that are higher than 15 feet. We probably deal with that more than this group probably deals with that specific item more than anything, and that's probably an indication of where the market is, probably an indication of maybe that is something that we should be looking at changing in the ordinance so that it's allowed up to 20 feet rather than having to go through the process in the future. Something to think about.
Is there a reason the applicant needs to obtain a building permit for the principal structure and the accessory structure?
No, that's a miscue.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Anyone else have questions for Brady?
I do not.
So the overall height, I thought somebody said 16'9", but that wouldn't be possible with a 14-foot wall.
We measured the height of the building to the midpoint of the roof.
Right.
So the peak of the roof will be 20 feet.
But they go.
Or 19.
To the mid part. Like Jerry said, that we'll have a lot of them coming up.
You may want to take a look. All right, then we are going to close the public hearing and move to the official action for the conditional use permit, application C-23002.
Did we do the public input?
Open.
Oh, sorry about that, thank you. We will move on to public input. So if anyone in the audience would like to approach the podium and give their feedback, please do so.
Tom Bullahai, 7460 Fairway Lane, and I own the property right adjacent to this. What Pat is going to be doing here is just, it's very nice. It fits right in with the neighborhood because I have a storage unit sitting right next to it, so it's going to be very much inconsistent with the neighborhood. That area down there, it's a low area. Questionable building. If you're able to build in there, you'd have to have a lot of fill to put in there. So I think it's a really good idea, and I think it's a good use of the property. So.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else that would like to share input? All right, now we can officially close the public input and close the public hearing portion of this and move on to the official action for the conditional use permit application C-23002. Do we have any motions?
I'll make a motion for a conditional use permit, 2023-002 with conditions 1 through 6. That's about it.
Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second the motion.
We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion has approved. All right, moving on to public hearing rezoning application R23001 for City of Breezy Point. If we can open the public hearing and have the applicant present.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Name's David Chansky. I'm the city administrator for the City of Breezy Point, 8319 County Road 11, Breezy Point, Minnesota 56472. In my capacity of Chief Administrative Officer for the City of Breezy Point, I submitted this application to rezone the parcels in front of you, 100809096, 925, and 924. The City Council authorized the purchase of these lots through the Crow Wing County land auction back in at the July 2020 council meeting. They authorized then City Administrator Patrick Wusso to go to the land auction and bid on these properties, gave him a limit on what to spend. He came underneath that limit. And then in August, at the August 2020 council meeting, he reported to the council on the details of that purchase. In total, it was just under $14,000, about $13,000 for all three lots, and then if they believe that there's about $500 in assessments the city had to pay on those lots as well. The intent at the time that the council purchased those was to use those for public use. Normally, it's general practice that if a city purchases a lot for public use, you would, in a short time frame, rezone them for public use. It's general practice that if a city owns a property, pretty much any property anywhere, if the intent is for public use, it should just be zoned public. I can't really comment as to why that didn't happen at that point, but it didn't, and that's why we're here today. I do want to acknowledge that these parcels do have an association with the city's disc golf course and the disc golf course expansion. When these were acquired, it was during the discussion of the expansion of this golf course with the intent of using these lots as a new parking lot. The council approved that project as part of the 2022 budget back in December of 2021, and then staff began working on that project in the spring of 2022. As it is now, those lots are being prepared. They have not been gravelled yet. They are not bituminous yet. It's not being used as a parking lot at this time. And the council has issued a motion not to move forward with the finalization of that project while they're considering the disc golf project as it is. So I just want to point that out as well. However, I do want to point out that whether or not the issue of the disc golf course, how that lands, I believe again the intent is still to use these parcels as public property and for public use. The council directed the Parks and Recreation Committee right now. They're looking at will be on Thursday. Are there any potential alternative uses for the public land, about roughly the 40 acres in White Birch 16 that was dedicated for public use when White Birch 16 was platted? And so that land is going to be used for public use, and I think the intent of these lots is to support that public use. Whether it is as a parking lot or at some other purpose, the intent is for them to be used as a public use, and therefore they should be zoned as public unless the council chooses to do otherwise. I will also point out that again, in my capacity as Chief Administrative Officer, I brought these forward. These have not gone to the council regarding rezoning, and the purpose for that was the fact that, as you know, when it comes to rezoning, the council is the final authority, as rezoning is technically a change to the city code. As such, I didn't bring it before the council first because I felt that would be a perversion of this process. We wanted you as the Planning Commission to truly look at these parcels, look at them, and I encourage you to look at them as if nothing has been done to them. If Patrick Wusso had come before you back in August or September of 2020, immediately after the parcels have been purchased, I'd encourage you to look at them as, at that time, would you have rezoned them for public use or not? Ignore kind of what's been done to them at this time. There's always restoration that can be done if the Planning Commission doesn't believe that that's the best use for that land. if the rezoning is recommended by you as the planning commission, then approved by the council, these lots will be consolidated together and then consolidated into that greater, I think it's outlot A, I believe is the technical one, it's either A or B. And so consolidated into that greater parcel again as for public land and for public purpose. I also want to point out that this is actually a process. We're starting with these lots right now again because of really the kind of targeting of these three to start is because of the discussion that's going on right now. And the zoning of these will play a role, I think, in that overall discussion, what the land and the surrounding purposes are moving forward. However, we are looking at all city properties right now. We're using exercise as part of our audit. We have to gather up all our city's properties, and we are looking at them all and looking at, you know, what are the zonings, and we'll likely be bringing back more properties to you in the future if there are properties that are being used for public use that aren't currently zoned public, or, you know, may not be currently actively being used, but the city has acquired them. There's no intent to have them developed either commercially, residentially, industrially. So we bring those back. So just want to let you know that we're also doing that. So this is kind of part of a greater project, but we're just starting with these for those reasons. With that, I guess I'll take any questions that you as the commission may have.
Excuse me. Why would you move the parking lot? I've not been involved in this.
So the city does have an existing parking lot, as
Right,
Mr. Tice, you
I've been
mentioned,
there, yeah.
on the southeast
Yeah.
section. At this point, it's definitely not moving it, it's adding it. This parking lot is much smaller. You know, really that parking lot, you're looking at, you know, if parked right, 20 to 30 cars is probably the best you can get in that parking lot. This intention of this new parking lot is under a perfect, and I want to clarify, perfect parking situation. Public Works Supervisor Joe Zierden does believe you could get up to 100. In reality, we probably wouldn't get close. That's if it's striped. That's if there's people out there parking cars. We don't intend to tar this. It'll be aggregate surface, so there won't be striping. And the only time there'd probably be people out there parking is if there was actually an event going on. So in a self-park situation, you can probably estimate we probably get maybe 50 cars on these new parcels. But with that increased looking at using this land, we anticipate that there'll be more need for parking, and without the parking lot, people have to resort to on-street parking.
Do you have concerns that this is a highly residential area? There isn't, parking lot to me seems a little bit more commercial. Any comments on the fact that this is surrounded by residential property that hasn't been developed yet, but probably at some point would like to?
I think it's one of the, I think the council, again, I can't necessarily speak to them, but when they, and I wasn't here at the time, looked at that. One of the reasons why we're leaving it in an kind of an aggregate format, you know, the street there is a gravel road, that it's going to try to believe as gravel. I know in the past, the Parks and Recreation Committee has discussed things like lighting, and right now that is not on the table. You know, we aren't putting lighting there. I think we're trying to be respectful of the surrounding residential areas so that, you know, it's not going to be lit up all at night. You know, it's, again, we're trying to keep it natural and to the kind of match the surrounding area as well with, you know, leaving it as aggregate, low maintenance. In the winter, kind of depending on what future uses there are on that land, it may or may not get plowed, depending on what those future uses might be and if there are winter uses.
So you did, I think, answer the question that I had, which is if the city, I'm aware the city owns other property that hadn't been marked as public, but that is a initiative to get everything kind of under the scope of city control to be public.
Correct. If it's, again, if there's no intent to use it residentially, industrial, commercially, pretty much the intent is to keep it, use it for a public purpose, it should be zoned public.
And the process for determining what that public use for the land is that handled by city council?
It's handled by the city council and with recommendations from the Parks and Recreation Committee.
If it's not zoned public, does it remain, is it private then, only by the city?
It's
Or
still
can-
owned, it's still owned by the city, as in it's publicly owned.
Right. I'm just thinking.
And the city
this-
could use it for kind of what then that zoning would allow. Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe parking lot is actually a conditional use in an R2. Am I correct on that?
I believe parks and historical sites are
Parks and
conditional use.
historical sites are conditional use. So if it's not zoned R2, we could get a conditional use permit to put a park there or something else. Again, what the end result of that land will be is still, again, it's an active discussion. But I believe the intent is to use it as some kind of public use, either as a parking lot supporting the greater 40-plus acre land, or putting some other, I know Parks and Rec will be discussing it, but maybe it's, playground there, pavilion there, or something else, again, that would be for public use, supporting that greater land.
Right.
And that would be consistent. I know of other areas where residential lots have been put into public for use of parks.
A lot of the lots actually around here on City Hall have been residential lots, a lot of them tax forfeit that the city over time has acquired to be as part of this complex, if you will.
So we're not being asked to approve whether it should or should not be a parking lot or whatever the city does. Council and Parks and Rec will handle that with public opinion at that point.
Correct. At this point, you're just here to determine whether or not a public zoning is appropriate in this area.
It's kind of really hindsight, isn't it?
It is, again, I can't speak to why it wasn't rezoned 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Right.
We can kind of try to address it now and do our best moving forward. I can tell, as long as I'm administrator, if we acquire properties in the future, that'll be one of the first things we do is looking at making sure it's zoned to how we want it to be zoned as soon as we acquire it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to staff review with Jerry.
Quickly. The zoning application 2023-001. The applicant is the City of Breezy Point. The legal description of lots 3, 4, and 5, Block 1, White Birch 16. The property is on White Overlook Drive. PID numbers are 10080924, 10080925, and 10080926. Current zoning is R2, medium density residential. The applicable codes are 153.032, 153.038, and 153.044. The request is to rezone lots 3, 4, and 5, Block 1, White Birch 16, R2 to public. The property is located on White Birch Drive, approximately 425 feet north of the intersection of White Overlook and Shady Trail. Property is served by White Overlook, and the public parkland abuts the rear of the parcel. The City of Breezy Point acquired the lots in 2020. Prior to purchase by the city, the lots were in tax forfeited, owned by Crow Wing County. The intended use of the lots was to combine them with the public parkland and to complement the public uses of the parkland. 153.032, 153.038, and 153.044 basically states that in the R2 zone, parks and historical sites would be a conditional use permit. That being said, if in fact the rezoning were to be denied, there still is an option to apply for a conditional use permit to make that parkland. With using the conditional use process and public parks and historical sites are allowed uses in the public zone. Thus the request to consider the rezoning. The findings, lot 3, 4, 5, Block 1, White Birch, currently zoned R2. Property abuts the public zoned land on the rear lot lines. The property is owned by the city, a public entity. The intended use is public in nature, parks. Mailed and public notice of the hearing were given. Public hearing is being held as we speak. The Planning Commission may by resolution choose to approve, deny, or modify the rezoning request. Said planning commission action shall be considered a recommendation to the city council for final determination. Unlike the variances in the CUPs that you've dealt with before, where you actually have the final action, in this case, the rezoning, the planning commission is a recommending body.
All right, so let's move to public input. If anyone would like to approach the podium, please state your name, address, and share your thoughts.
Good evening. My name's Tim Scari. I live at 7531 Winter Trail. I own with family 4 lots on White Overlook, about 3 lots north of the new proposed parking lot. I just want to bring you back in time a little bit. Back in 2020, I went to a county auction, intent to buy those 3 lots, and I was bidding against one other bidder. And when it was evident I couldn't keep up with this bidder, I quit bidding and asked him later on in the evening who he was. He identified himself as Patrick Russo, city administrator. He also made comments during that conversation that his mission was to buy those lots no matter what it took, what it cost. Within a week or two of that, because I was curious what's going on with those lots, they are residential, beautiful home lots. I discovered that there was a proposed expansion of golf course going in, and that would be a parking lot. So that's back in 2020. City administrator stands up and says, we don't know what happened. I would like somebody within the city to acknowledge that there were a lot of errors made, probably laws broken, ordinances ignored. So I knew in 2020 that this parking lot was going to be for the new expansion. It's now 2023, and it's not a coincidence that a month ago I wrote the council a letter expressing concerns about how the zoning was handled on those 3 lots. Voila, here we are today, a month later, now applying for zoning. As a citizen, if I had acquired those lots and I was to bulldoze 1,000 trees, turn it into a parking lot, want to put a convenience store on it, and then, by the way, I'm going to apply for a zoning change 2 years later. What penalties, what consequences would I have as a citizen to that kind of behavior? We've got that kind of behavior on our city. They've now decided that they don't have to pay attention to law. They don't have to pay attention to their own rules. And because I bring it up a month ago about what about zoning? Now we're going to apply for zoning. We're going to do it the right way. This project has been illegitimate from day one. The mission has been this Frisbee golf course. We're not here to discuss that. I'm here to discuss the zoning in a neighborhood where I own property. It's going to harm my value. I ask all you members to consider if somebody was going to dump a 100-car parking lot in your residential neighborhood, what would you think about that? Would you accept that or like it? We're going to have increased traffic on a residential road. We're going to have extra litter. We're going to have... This parking lot was designed for tournaments in mind. It isn't designed for the kids of Breezy Point that want to go play a golf course, which, by the way, we already have 18 holes. This is designed for tournaments and the crowds that tournaments bring in. I also read in some notes that they were considering a pro shop. Well, why don't we have a convenience store and a hot dog stand on this parking lot to take care of all the tournament people that come in. This project was never designed for the residents. It's designed for a handful of out-of-town Frisbee advocates, clubs, whatever you want to call it. They want a 36-hole destination course, best in the world, and I'm here to say that you are an independent body. I know you all work for the city of Breezy Point, but this should not be allowed because they didn't follow the rules, the laws, and everything else. And to apply for it now is, I used the term the other day, cart before the horse. This is certainly a big time. They've never notified any of the adjoining residents. Nobody's had a public input till tonight. We've got an ugly parking lot already there, and now they want to do it the right way. And I beg your decision be to reject this because it was illegitimate from the start. It's illegitimate now. And without that parking lot, they don't have access to that controversial golf course because they don't have enough parking on the other side. Think about what you would do with your own. We moved to Breezy Point for the up north feel in the neighborhoods and the woods and all this. And all of a sudden, there's an ugly parking lot in the middle of residential. So please reject this. Thank you.
Is there any other input? Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Jonathan Curtin. I live at 31709 Greenstein Drive. We recently finished construction of our home. My wife and family and I, we have 3 little kids, moved all the way from Portland, Oregon. We specifically chose Breezy Point and chose to settle here. I'm very much against rezoning these properties to public space and putting a parking lot on it. Had I known, and there was no way I could have known because these are still zoned R2 residential, I wouldn't have moved my family to Breezy Point. I would have chosen another town in the area. I wouldn't have built a 4,000 square foot house on Greenstein Drive, and I wouldn't have become a Breezy Point taxpayer. And I firmly believe that I'm not alone in that. We have friends that have looked at properties in that area, and they've ultimately said, actually, there's some other stuff going on there. We don't want to put up our houses there. So I would plead with you to do the same, to reject the application to rezone these properties. I think it fundamentally changes that neighborhood, and I don't think it's for the better. Thank you.
Bill Toft, 31877 Greenstein Drive. And I wasn't going to speak tonight, but there's a couple things I just want to correct. We've been told by the people that have been planning this disc golf course that parking lot, there's going to be 250 to 300 people there in these 2-day tournaments. And they're only planning one porta potty, I might add, for that 50-acre disc golf course. If you go back and look at the notes and the minutes of the various meetings, this was always intended to be for the disc golf course expansion. It was never intended for any other use, regardless of what they might say at this point in time. I've looked at every note and every minute from the last 4 years, and there never was a vote to move forward with this project. And they always will say, well, we decided to include it on a consent vote in that December 21, which is, by Robert's rules, you can't do. You can't put a controversial item like that to vote like that. Do not allow this change, please. There's almost 75 children that live in the vicinity of this, and all this traffic, I pray nothing happens. Thank you for your time.
Tom Lullahy, 7460 Fairway Lane. Being that I was the mayor at the time, I can attest to the fact that as part of the expansion, we wanted to relay out the existing disc golf course, and we wanted to have longer holes because that was the request that was going on. And that necessitated moving the parking lot because the existing parking lot was going to be too small. And that's why we chose those 3 lots. We did everything above board. There was no hidden agenda or anything like that. When a property goes on tax forfeit, the city is given the first opportunity to accept that property and reserve it for our own use. Way back when those lots first went on tax forfeit, we didn't see a use because this predated any actual use for that public property. We did contact the county to see if we could exercise that option again and just basically have those transferred to us. The county said, no, we can't do that. They have to go through the public bidding process. So that's why we had to go to the tax forfeit auction and obtain them that way. Again, and that was something we authorized the city administrator to go and bid on those properties because that was our long-term plan that had been discussed over and over again. It shows up as part of our comprehensive plan. So, I mean, this was a use that we had been planning for a long time. And the intent was to make those properties public right away. And however, that was right at the time when Patrick was retiring and we were bringing on David, and it kind of fell through the cracks as far as the rezoning those to public. But that was always the intent ever since day one. And like I say, there was nothing hidden about it. We discussed it in the meetings. We didn't get a lot of press coverage for it. Unfortunately, if we had more press coverage, more people would have known about it. But that, again, that was always the intent. That was going to be public property. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Diane Williams, 32744 Northwoods Lane. I have been a member of the Parks Committee since the day it began. Sadly, I lost most of my records, but I did find in 2014 where money was spent on this golf. It was not a secret project. It was not done in the dark of night. It was open and available for people to find out about. Sadly, Parks meetings don't get much attention until it's something like this, where it becomes controversial. But it was, I assure you, it was not secret. And any mistakes like Tom was explaining and transition of administrators, that stuff happens. It's just, accidental. Some things just slip through. But this golf, or whatever that land is going to be, is going to need some parking. I don't think people want cars parked up and down the street. So they're going to need to park someplace for whatever use it's used for. And it is a public use. I'm a member of the public, you are. Somebody from Nisswa is also a member of the public. When I go on vacation, I use facilities at other places, and I'd like to have a place to park when I get there to use those. So that's what this is about. Whatever happens with the decision of the Parks Committee, that's for Thursday. But I also would say I have not heard a single word spoken until tonight from Mr. Toft about a pro shop or whoever mentioned the pro shop. I've never heard that discussed or spoken as an intended facility there. That would be news to me, and I would like to know what they're thinking and, find out all the particulars, just like you probably would. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I respond? First of all, I didn't say that. And in the notes, there's talk about they want to put bathrooms there and they want to put a gazebo there. And there has been talk about them putting some sort of kiosk to sell items on that. Thank you.
I was just going to say that I didn't make that up. It's in the Breezy Point website notes talking about a pro shop. It's for there to anybody to read, and I stand by my statement on that.
Is there anyone else?
Hi, my name is Valerie Walleen. I live at 31894 Blue Ridge Drive. I adjoin Outlot A, to which these parking lot parcels will be combined, And while there's lots of emotion that swirls around this, I'd like to give you guys some factual reasons for considering either denying or requiring the city to complete further action before moving forward on granting. I'm going to focus my comments on the ordinances and on the facts that are available to us and try to stay away from my own feelings, okay? So my goal is to state why the committee should recommend denying or delaying this rezoning application under the city's ordinances. If there's time, I'll give my personal opinions. The city's purpose is not properly reflected in the zoning request. Here's why. The rezoning of these lots are also a request to combine these lots with Outlot A. As such, the city did not notice the owners within 350 feet of Outlot A. Because Outlot A cannot be used how the city intends to use it without the parking, these are an integral part of the must and cannot be considered separately from how the city is planning to develop Outlot A. To do so is to violate our ordinances. The city is currently in violation of the city's ordinances under many provisions. If this were a private party or corporation, would you grant the rezoning application without first requiring the owner to come into compliance with the current zoning requirements? Let me give you the examples that I could find in a relatively short period of time. It's currently zoned R2. Under R2, development under Ordinance 153.032, which is listed up there as part of our packet, there is, before you can remove clear-cut trees and open vegetation, you are required to get a conditional use permit. Where's the conditional use permit? Deny the zoning application and require them to get the conditional use permit. They've already cleared it. How do you enforce the zoning when there are violations of the zoning ordinances? What's the penalty to the city for clear-cutting 3 lots without a conditional use permit? Ignorance of the zoning ordinances is no excuse. Okay? Accidental oversight is no excuse for not applying and holding the city accountable to our ordinances. They are our laws, and the city is not exempt from following them. Secondly, to convert to a park, to park use, under Ordinance 153.032, paragraph C10, a conditional use permit is required. The intent is to convert this to park use. Where's the conditional use application or permit? It's not a part of the rezoning application. Violation number 3. Again, under Ordinance 153.032, there is a requirement for a conditional use permit to fill with more than 50 yards of cubic fill for an R2 lot. There are 3 R2 lots. There's more than 50 cubic yards of fill there that they hauled in. There's approximately 25 dump trucks. 50 cubic yards is approximately 2 dump trucks. That would be a total of 6 dump trucks for those 3 lots, for the city to not have had to get a conditional use permit and still be in compliance with the city's own ordinances. Okay, again, they violated their ordinances. They hauled in a lot more than 6 dump trucks. The city's requested zoning change would permit an inconsistent use of the land by locating a parking lot in the center of a residential neighborhood. Thank you, Marcy, for bringing that up earlier. I'd like to expand, provide a couple of additional questions. Where else in the city do we have a 100-car parking lot? Paved, impervious surface, or aggregate? Okay, and what is the resort? Is it residential? Is it parkland? Or is it commercial? Putting a 100-car parking lot in a residential neighborhood is essentially converting those lots to a commercial use. There is nothing like it in the city of Breezy Point that isn't a commercial use for a 100-car parking lot. Secondly, how, when you're talking about developing Outlot A and these lots being supportive of that development as park, okay, you can't separate it from that. That is the declared use at the present, whether it's disc golf or playground or pickleball, it's park. How is a 100-car parking lot justified for the average residential neighborhood to use a park space? Where do we have park spaces? Right here. How many car parking lot do we have? Really, only that one is dedicated to the park use behind us, and what is there, 20? If you want to get really creative and really broad stroke this, you add the additional 30 parking spots out here. That's 50 for this park space. Baseball, diamond, basketball court, big, huge playground. Okay, it's not justifiable. It is converting to essentially a commercial use. To approve the zoning application without requiring the city to follow its ordinances places the city above the law, rather than as an example of how to follow the law. This sets a dangerous precedent for any and all future violations of the ordinance. Arguably, it could be viewed as invalidating the ordinances altogether. Now, I know that's a bit of a stretch and it seems far-fetched and almost laughable, but how many of you know an attorney who would argue that? I mean, we all do. Finally, as a citizen, my question is, how is the city, I mentioned this earlier, how is the city penalized for its violations? The zoning ordinance provides fines, and every day that fine starts over. If you started the clock from the city's violations of how those lots were zoned R2, they came in and clear cut them, they came in and hauled more fill than was permitted, more than the 50 cubic yards per lot, it's $300, I think, a day. And that's for a petty misdemeanor. It can go up to $1,000 a day, and it's every day that the violation exists, that fine is to be assessed. You guys are supposed to assess that, fine the city for that. But that doesn't make sense. The city pays itself a fine. Okay, so in essence, what is the consequence, if you will, to the city for violating its own ordinances? Well, I think it's great that the city has gone back and tried to rectify it. And I appreciate that they're trying to rezone this. I don't think they did it correctly because they didn't notice all of the owners of Outlot A. Okay, that could be argued. We could argue that back and forth. I'll give you that. However, you cannot escape the fact that the current use does not permit what the city has done, and there are violations. And how are you, as a zoning board, going to address those violations? One way is to deny the request for rezoning. And quite frankly, one of the things that is that you guys have asked other people tonight is the zoning, the rezoning necessary? And I would ask you to go back to our ordinances and compare R2 uses with public uses. The same requirements are there. They'd have to get a conditional use permit for what they did for the lots. They have to get a conditional use permit to convert it to park land. Okay, all of those same things are present. So it's unnecessary. They can do what they want to do, essentially, what they've already done with the same zoning. So why do we need a zoning change? Is it only because the city owns it? If it's only because the city owns it, it's the improper use of the system, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public input, please?
Brian Woline, 31894 Blue Ridge Drive.
stand up here in two capacities. One, the first one I want to talk about is I'm a real estate broker, been in the business since 1994. Simply put, and I am on the Governmental Affairs Committee for the Greater Lakes Association of Realtors. Served on the Planning and Zoning Board for the City of Pequot. I'm familiar with the process. Know that none of you are on the city, but you represent city in this matter. I would ask that you hold the city to the same standards as you hold citizens. I, as a broker, real estate broker, have people ask me every day, what can I do here? What can I do there? You guys have information here that is plain to see has not been followed. The best way that I can put this is that you've got before yourselves a Pandora's box, and it's just cracked. It's not even opened yet. And look, the only way that you're going to be able to, in my opinion, set this right is start from the beginning and do it all over again and do it right. This is a Band-Aid. This will hurt the credibility of the city of Breezy Point. There has to be consequences. I don't know how else to put that other than you need to realize that this is a situation where above the law can really come back and open up past and future instances where you're not going to follow your own zoning regulations. And that, again, is just a crack in that box. Thank you.
Anyone else that would like to approach?
I apologize for forgetting one thing. I wanted to get it out there. Within the last few weeks, several lot owners were notified of survey operations going on down there. To illustrate how backwards, cart before the horse situation we have here, they're running survey crews down there currently after they've tore down thousands of trees, bulldozed a parking lot, and they're now running surveys to even see if they've encroached on our private property. That has happened.
I'm aware of no survey crews hired by the city of Breezy Point to conduct any survey operations on city land. Thank you.
Is there anyone that has not approached yet that would like to?
Good evening. Tim Olson, 31908 Blue Ridge Drive. The Wallians that spoke so eloquently before me are my neighbors. Mr. Toft is my neighbor, Mr. Curtin's my neighbor. So as much as I would love to ramble on about the disc golf course, this is not the time nor the place, but this is the time and the place for this parking lot fiasco, which is a fiasco. Because if I did what the city did, much like Val said, I would be fined. Fact. That is a fact. If I bought those 3 lots and I did what the city has done, I would be fined, I would be liable, I would be held accountable. Not a question. Mr. Chansky asked you to treat this as if nothing had happened, just like 2020 when they were purchased. Why would he ask you that? Why would he ask you that when it has happened. Because it's happened. No one can tell us how many truckloads of fill have been brought in there. But if we have driven by that property, we can see it. I mean, I watched it happening from my back deck, unfortunately, across the valley that used to be full of trees. Okay? The city violated its own ordinances. Fact. So, if you folks recommend that this is rezoned, in all actuality, in my opinion, everyone that you have ever told no, you should call back and say yes. Anyone you told no tonight, you should say, whoops, yes. Or we should hold the city to the same standards as everyone else. I heard talk about this being a secretive project. That has no impact on this. It doesn't matter if we were informed or we weren't. It doesn't change the violations at all. So we can debate about the disc golf course and how that came to pass and who told who what. But it doesn't change the fact that what has happened out there on that property that is zoned residential has already taken place. What is the penalty for that? That's a question. What is the penalty for that? I would love to hear the answer to that question. I would also strongly encourage you folks to take a stand and call a spade and say, we did wrong. We'll fix it going forward, but we can't pretend it didn't happen, because it did. The evidence is there. Any one of us with no knowledge of construction, of forestry, of development, any one of us can go out there and see it by driving by. Fact. It's not debatable, it's a fact. So I look at the city website, right? And what is the city slogan or motto? Does anybody know what's on the website, Mr. Jansky? Green trees, and I don't know the order, forgive me. Green trees, blue or clear water, and great people. I like green trees and blue and clear water, and I like great people. Here's an example where we have destroyed the green trees. And we have not done what great people do in a residential area, in the single most populated year-round residential area in the city of Breezy Point. We've bulldozed 3 lots, cut down thousands of trees, all the while violating our own ordinances. There has to be some sort of repercussions for that. Thank you.
10 seconds. I spoke to Joe Zierden this morning. 25 trucks of fill were brought into the parking lot. Thank you.
Due to time constraints, we're going to have to close the public hearing portion of this at this time and move to official action for rezoning application R20.
We did receive another, a letter from Mark Fletner, and I would ask that that be also part of the record.
So there is a letter here from Mark and Carol Sletner. Please, as you see on the screen, bring that into record as well. All right, we're going to close the public hearing, move to official action for rezoning application R23001. Do we have any current motions?
All we're doing is recommending, right? We're not doing a motion.
Would it be a motion to recommend, though?
Yes.
I think there's been a lot of information put forth tonight that me personally would like to ask some questions on additional use permitting, processing, just to make sure that we have covered everything that we would need to in order to make a recommendation. That's my first thought. And so I would be in favor of making a motion to put this on hold for the June meeting, to be able to do some more research into what would be required if there was conditional use permitting required, to ensure that we are following proper process.
I agree, yes.
Then I will make a motion to adjourn this to the next meeting on the next June meeting, so that we have some time to do some additional research into this, to find out what permits may or may not have been needed, and just to do some more research into this.
Okay, I second it.
We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion has carried. We are moving on to any old business. I don't see anything in the agenda, so any additional staff reports? Moving on, any commissioner reports here that anyone would like to bring up? All right, then we are adjourned. Thank you.